What is up, everyone? Today we're going to have a little bit of a ramble about this lovely MacBook Air that I've got sitting behind me. It's quite the story, so I'm going to tell it start to finish. As most of you know, I've been using an M1 Mac Mini as my main machine for the last several years. I purchased it very close to the initial release, and it was part of the first wave of Apple Silicon machines that Apple brought out after the initial announcement that they were transitioning from Intel to Apple Silicon. The M1 Mac Mini and all of the M1 machines were just absolutely phenomenal. They blew everyone away at the time, and even 4 or 5 years later, whatever it is now, they are still absolutely incredible machines. So for all this time, my M1 Mini, which was the basic M1 Mini configured with 16 gigs of RAM, it's been doing absolutely everything I asked of it. But a few months ago, Apple announced the first true major upgrade to the Mac Mini in a long time, and that was, of course, the M4 Mac Mini.
The new Mini is just 5 by 5 inches, so it takes up much less space on your desk compared to the previous generation. The new Mini jumps from M2 all the way to M4.
As soon as I saw that little guy, I knew that I really wanted to upgrade to it. And I always wanted, as I mentioned in my initial Mac Mini video all those years ago, I always wanted to stay a little bit on top of the updates. So instead of keeping a machine for maybe 6 or 8 years and then buying a new machine after all that time, you know, kind of saving up all over again and purchasing one, I was more interested in upgrading every few years so that there was still a value to the previous machine, so that I could sell the existing machine and pay for a chunk of the new machine as the previous machine still had some value. So that's exactly what I wanted to do. Now, I knew as soon as Apple announced the M4 Mini that the M1 and the M2 Mini on the used market would start to kind of drop in terms of value. So I arranged a sale of my M1 Mini super quick. I worked out a deal with a good friend of mine, and he really needed an upgrade. So he wanted the M1 Mini, and that was great. That worked out fantastically. It was a good deal for both of us. So he purchased that machine, and I was going to go and purchase an M4 Mac Mini. But of course, this was kind of just before Christmas. We're talking around November time. So I needed to be a little careful with the old finances. And I decided to try and pay monthly for the Mac Mini. I applied for financing through Apple and I got rejected, which was a huge shame. So I started to make a kind of plan. How was I going to get this machine? And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't finance it. So I'd made the deal. I'd got rid of the M1 Mini. And of course I needed a Mac. Thankfully, long-term viewer and really good friend of mine, Jack, stepped up and gave me a fantastic deal on this lovely M1 MacBook Air. Now, of course, I didn't set out at the beginning of all of this to pick up a MacBook Air, but it's worked out brilliantly because rewind a good few months ago, as you guys know, Jack, and this is the same Jack, so Jack, if you're watching, huge thanks. Jack donated a 2016 MacBook Pro as an upgrade to my 2013 MacBook Pro. And that was really nice, but it's no secret that those older Intel machines now are really, you know, starting to struggle a little bit. Still totally usable, you've just got to wait that much longer for everything to happen, and it's very difficult jumping from an Apple Silicon main machine over to an older Intel laptop. There's just a huge difference, especially because I use Apple Silicon in work as well. We also have an M1 Mac Mini there. So I was bobbing along quite happily with the 2016 MacBook Pro, but when this opportunity came along, I thought, yeah, this makes perfect sense. Not only do I get to update my laptop to a much newer, much quicker machine, a lovely Apple Silicon machine, but I can use it as my desktop for the time being until I can afford to pick up an M4 Mac Mini. So that's what I've been doing. For the last couple of months, this MacBook Air has been my main and only system. I've been using it out and about as my laptop and also here at home on my main setup, powering my monitor and all my accessories on the main setup. So to wrap up the story, I have now kind of sorted out my situation, and I do have an M4 Mac Mini video incoming. It may be the next video on the channel depending on how things work out. I've pretty much sorted that. So I've had a kind of 2-month-ish time of using the MacBook Air as my main machine, and it's been absolutely glorious. But from this point on, it will just be my laptop because I've arranged an M4 Mac Mini, which was always the long-term goal anyway. But what's lovely about this is if I didn't have that initial delay, if I wasn't rejected for the finance, I wouldn't be the proud owner of this MacBook Air. So it's all worked out beautifully. I'd still have the 2016 MacBook Pro as my main machine, and I would be looking at some point to try and upgrade that to an Apple Silicon Mac. So story time complete. You guys now have kind of like the frantic picture of everything that happened. I am super excited because I just love where I've ended up with these machines. It's great. We can now just take a little look at this MacBook Air. So from Jack, as always, unboxing experience, absolutely wonderful, excellent packaging, and I've got the original box for this machine, which is brilliant. And you may be wondering what on earth is going on with the air fryer pictures behind me. Anyone that's in the IMNC nerdy NATTERS Discord server will know exactly what's going on. You guys love to tease me about the air fryer, and in fact, 2025 is going to be a very good year for the air fryer because we are going to finally give it some coverage on the channel, maybe in not quite the way you're all expecting, so definitely stay tuned for that. But of course, Jack was lovely enough to tease me with a couple of air fryers, which was a big surprise. I had to unbox this kind of late at night, so I had to be quiet, but yeah, it was still a shock when I pulled these out of the package. I also love the way that he's given me a variety of air fryer images. You know, I've got a nice sort of cartoony style one, and then I've got a printout of a proper one as well. So yeah, brilliant. Everything I could ever need and more. Needless to say, after this video, I will be ripping these down and retiring them to some kind of drawer somewhere for me to find in a few years' time and have a chuckle over, because I'll remember this exact moment. So let's have a look at this MacBook Air. I'm just going to pull it into frame here because it is, firstly, obviously, super tiny and super lovely. I mean, the coverage of these is extensive, so I'm not going to do a typical video that kind of everybody does. There were a million plus videos about these at time of release, and then over the years there have been more and more. I'm not really going to add to that. I'm going to do my usual IMNC ramble about this and kind of focus on the machine from my own particular uses and my own situation. But I'll say right now, the #1 most glorious thing about this, in a similar way to my 2016 MacBook Pro, is just how beautifully compact it is. It is a treat for me as somebody that carried around a 15-inch MacBook Pro for a decade, and prior to that carried around a 15-inch PowerBook G4. It is massively, well, I guess before that I had the 2008 MacBook Pro as well, but I've always had 15-inch machines, and to go down to the 13-inch in your bag, you just don't know if they're there or not. Absolutely hilariously, this has happened on 2 or 3 occasions over the last couple of months. Because these are so tiny and weightless, and I've got so many other things in my bag, I can't tell the weight difference between when I have this in my bag or not, when I put my bag on my shoulders. So there's been a couple of times, because I keep my laptop, traditionally I've always kept my laptop in my bag, that's where it lives, in my backpack, when I've gone to leave the house. Because I've been using this as a desktop machine as well, on 2 or 3 occasions I've actually forgotten to take my laptop with me because it's still hooked up to the setup at home. There are definitely pros and cons in terms of using a laptop as a desktop, but I never thought that would be one of them, simply forgetting your laptop on your desk. Years ago, when I was having issues with my Hackintosh, I used my MacBook Pro for quite some time, for many, many months and different chunks of time, as my main machine. And then again, when I sold my Hackintosh, I had a laptop-based setup again. So I'm no stranger to the laptop/desktop setup. And it's easier than ever now with these glorious USB-C ports, these mega fast Thunderbolt ports that just make everything happen. It's still very, very impressive to me. So with this setup, I've been able to use a 10 gig Ethernet adapter on one of them. And then with the other port, I've been able to use the Apple multi-AV adapter or whatever it's called to get HDMI out, as well as USB-A to go to my hub, and a power pass-through so that I can connect a charger. And that's been everything I've needed for my basic desktop setup with one external monitor. If I was investing more heavily into that setup, and I was going to retain this on the setup for a long time, then I would have bought a better dock to use with multiple displays. But what I had was absolutely fine. So I think we'll change up here. We'll take a look at this closer up on the desk. But yeah, I just want to emphasize just how portable, light, and glorious these machines are. It has really become something that I now focus on, Before, years ago, and I guess up until I got the 2016 MacBook Pro, I was always a big 15-inch laptop guy, completely through and through, didn't care how bulky it was, but these days I really do see the advantage to having these tiny little machines that you can sort of throw around really easily. It is nice. I've given this machine a quick wipe over, but this is very much a real life, real world video, so this is my main machine. There may be a little bit of dirt here and there, but for the most part, we're looking okay, and this came to me in pristine condition from Jack. It was absolutely perfect, so there's no issues with this computer whatsoever. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but I actually paid like for like. So the deal I got for the Mac Mini, I paid down to the very last penny, the exact same amount for this MacBook Air. So it was pretty much just a swap, which was incredible. Now a quick look around for any of you guys that have forgotten. This is, of course, just your standard M1 MacBook Air, the design that we just all know so well. But in fact, my first ever MacBook Air, out of all the machines that I've had in my life, I've never owned a MacBook Air from any generation. Hilariously, after I got this, then just a week or so later, I purchased a second MacBook Air for one of my children. And that was an older MacBook Air off eBay. And it's funny that 2 MacBook Airs came into my life within the space of about 2 weeks of each other at most. And prior to this, I've never even experienced a MacBook Air in person, really. Other than friends that have owned them in shops, I've never owned one. They've always fascinated me, especially the older ones. You know, first gen MacBook Air was just a crazy, crazy machine at the time.
This is it. Let me take it out here. This is the new MacBook Air, and you can get a feel for how thin it is. Yeah, there it is. Look at this.
Changing up the angle ever so slightly because I realized we couldn't see the air fryer over there, so let's record over here instead. Now, one incredible thing about the Apple Silicon Macs is just the instant on and how ready the machines always are. You open the lid and they are ready to go. You can keep it in your bag for 2 or 3 days, maybe even more. The batteries are incredible and it's just ready. You whack in your password and you're ready to go straight away. Certain technologies that have allowed this have been in Macs for years and years. LED displays being a prime example. As soon as you open the lid, the display is at perfect brightness, ready to use. We've had the luxury of that for the last 15 years or so. And then of course the swap from hard drives to flash storage. Opening the lid of the machine, everything is there much, much quicker. You don't have to wait for the disk to spin up. And now it seems like we've had a third giant leap just with the overall efficiency of the machines and how quickly these little chips can wake up. We are right back there always. Password in, bang, and anything you had there prior is just waiting to be used. I've had zero slowdown. With my Intel MacBook Pros, it would be a case of, yes, it would of course stay in sleep, stay in my bag, even stay with battery, albeit not as long, but I'd open the lid and then it was just a little waiting game for everything to slowly come back into place. Let's check out the specs on this guy. This is the lowest end MacBook Air. So we have the Apple M1 8GB. What's interesting from this screen is it's not immediately obvious, but this is the 7-core GPU model. If we go into System Report, so total number of cores, 7. And as you saw, this is the 8GB model. All M1 Macs can be configured to 16, but this is 8, so this is an off-the-shelf Mac. For storage, this is the 256 gigs, so again, the base model. Exactly the same as my Mac Mini. I never pay for more internal storage. If I'm ever going to, it would be in my laptop, and the only reason that I've used so much space with only 48 gigs available is because I have my full work account on here as well. So I have my personal account and I also have my work account, and on the work account, I sync and locally store both iCloud and Google Drive with all of our work documents, and that's what takes up all the space. On my desktop at home, where I don't have my work account enabled, my free space is much more because, as you guys know, I don't typically store anything locally. I have a lovely big network rack, some lovely servers, and everything lives on there. And that's just the way that I like things. It means that I never have to pay more for these machines to get more storage in the box. And when I want to chop and change machines, it's really easy because I don't really have any data to move around. Even if I wanted to migrate from this, I'd have no data to take off the machine because it's all just synced cloud stuff anyway. So storage has never been a problem. Back to the memory for a second, because a lot of people discuss memory. It's very, very interesting to see these days just what the different kind of perception is of what is required, what is useful. What's funny about memory these days is you look at 8 gigs and it instantly kind of sparks a discussion. We often have discussions about memory, what's enough, what is too little, can we really scrape by on 8 gigabytes? So I've got quite extensive experience with both 16 gig and 8 gig M1 machines. My Mac Mini was a 16 gig. This machine is an 8 gig, and I've also used for the last several years an 8 gigabyte M1 Mac Mini in work. And I get by just fine on 8 gigabytes, even with things like video editing. The last couple of videos that you guys have seen on the channel have been edited with this guy, connected to a 10 gig Ethernet adapter, editing to and from my nice beefy NAS. Super quick, no slowdown, no errors. 8 gigs has been perfect. Now granted, I do have the benefit of I typically use mainly Apple applications. I use Final Cut Pro for video, I use Safari for my internet browsing, and I use Pages and Numbers for my word processing and my spreadsheets. So Apple applications tend to be really efficient, really streamlined on macOS, of course. I could imagine if I needed to use Chrome and Microsoft Office 365 and loads of other kind of third-party apps, I may really want to look into something more than 8 gigs of RAM, but my uses are really simple. And a way that you guys can see that is just by looking at my dock. If we go into my dock and take a look at all the applications that I use. So we've got a lot of stock Apple stuff. Discord, of course, doesn't really take up much. Yeah, and that's it. That is pretty much it. I've had a lot of discussions with people, especially on IMNC Nerdy Natters, when people are going for a new machine and the immediate advice is go for 16 gig, go for 16 gig. I have to agree to a certain extent, but if an 8 gigabyte machine presents itself, depending on your uses, it is pretty easy in lots of situations to get by with 8 gigs. And I find macOS is so good at memory management, and of course the flash storage is so quick, so swapping in and out of storage, if it comes to that, is not a huge deal anyway. If you get super nerdy and you always look at your stats, which I don't, then you can get really bogged down in it, but no, it's been absolutely fine for me and it will continue to be fine. I'm planning on keeping this laptop as my main laptop for several years. Connectivity is another really nice thing for this machine. Super speedy USB 4, 2 ports, up to 40 gigabit per second. And by the very nature of these machines, there is not much else to look at in here. This is one of your most basic, what you see is what you get, simple, streamlined machines that you could possibly imagine owning. So let's quit out of System Profiler. And we're just gonna have a little look. We're not gonna get too far into all of this stuff because we've seen it all time and time again, but let's just have a little look at some benchmarks. Let's look at this super speedy disk first of all. So on reads, we're looking at nearly 3 gigabytes per second on this internal SSD. Very close to 3 gigabytes a second. And then on the writes, we're looking at about 2.3 gigabytes per second. So incredibly fast storage in these machines. Pulling up Mac Tracker, let's open up this side by side with my Mac Mini that I previously owned. So here we have the two M1 machines side by side. This is the Mac Mini that I recently sold, the Mac Mini that I purchased just after it came out, and now the MacBook Air that I've replaced it with. So looking here, they both came out in November 2020. That was the month where we saw the first wave of Apple Silicon machines, which was the Mac Mini, the MacBook Air, and the 13-inch MacBook Pro. The Mac Mini was discontinued in January of 2023. That was 2 years ago. This is currently January 2025 as of recording. Moving over to this MacBook Air, you can see it wasn't discontinued until March of 2024, which was a fair bit later, because they offered these M1 MacBook Airs as a lower end alternative and a cheaper alternative to some of the newer models that were released after this. One really nice thing about the upgrade that I've done here is MacBook Airs tend to have a higher value than Mac Minis because they're laptops. They have, of course, a built-in screen, built-in keyboard and trackpad. They are portable. So from the very word go, they're more expensive. A Mac Mini 256 was $699 and a MacBook Air 256 was $999. So the fact that I was able to sell and then purchase this for the exact same amount is a pretty good deal. And also, laptops tend to be beaten up a little bit more. So when you go on eBay, If a Mac Mini is working and you can see the photos and you know it's in good condition, you can pretty much safely purchase that knowing that it's going to be absolutely fine. With a laptop, it's always a bit more risky because people carry them around. You don't quite know what condition the display is going to be in. You don't quite know what condition the keyboard's going to be in. So it's really nice to purchase if you can from someone that you know, a friend, a colleague, and that's exactly what happened here. It was coming from somewhere where I could absolutely guarantee it was going to be a perfect condition machine. So I really do think that my transition over to this was not only sensible in terms of a kind of stepping stone to my next machine, and I've gained a bonus laptop, it also made financial sense as well. One absolutely incredible thing, although again, it makes not much difference, this design is completely fanless. So it is impossible for this computer to make any noise, which is really, really quite cool. The Mac Mini is not fanless, but famously, it is near impossible to get the fan to spin up during any kind of normal use. I've slammed my Mac Mini with crazy sort of 4K things and that we've done for videos in the past as benchmarks. I'm just thinking back to when we tried to slam the NAS in my 10 gig Ethernet /QNAP NAS series, and when we did all that crazy 4K stuff and the rendering and this, that and the other, it's still whisper quiet, which is incredible. And I slam my work machine as well. I really do slam the M1 Mac Mini, and I just can't really make the fan spin up. So you never hear them anyway. But what's cool about the MacBook Air, especially with it being a portable machine, is there's no fan. There's nothing to suck in a load of dust, nothing to get super dirty. I was just having a look at the power section on Mac Tracker, and it dawned on me that we missed out the battery when we were in System Profiler. So the battery is currently showing a maximum capacity of 93%, and we have a cycle count of 139 total. My current charge is 21%. So looking at Mac Tracker, this battery will do up to 1,000 cycles. So we have a very, very strong and good battery situation here, and that reflects into everyday use as well. I never thought I would be one of these people, but there are times where I've left my home without my charger, and it's just not a problem. And don't get me wrong, some of the later Intel Macs had fantastic batteries. Even my 2013 MacBook Pro was always astonishing in terms of battery power. I think it's been a strength of Macs for a very long time, but this is just another level. And what's really nice is the industry is really being pushed towards creating more efficient machines. There are some lovely ARM options in the PC world now, with some laptops getting crazy, crazy battery results. Even simple things like laying in bed if you want to watch a film in bed. I don't know how many of you guys actually use your laptops for that, but it's something that I do from time to time. I would always in the past need to have the charger there because, you know, a film in bed, you haven't got full charge anyway because you've used your laptop through the day. You're gonna need to plug it in. But with this, it's just pull it out your bag, open the lid, and 9 times out of 10, I've got enough juice to do something like that. Just for the sake of completeness, I'll show you guys that the webcam is really impressive as well. It's been great for the small amount of time I need to use the webcam. I try and avoid it. I really hate Zoom and Teams and all those other things. So I want to show you all something that I'm really pleased about. For anyone that watched my MacBook Pro 2016 video, I was really disappointed with USB-C. I'm kind of old school and I was late to the USB-C party and I hadn't had that much experience. So when I experienced the USB-C ports on the 2016 MacBook Pro, I was bitterly disappointed. But thankfully, I now have experience of newer and less worn USB-C ports, and I'm pleased to report that I've joined the club of people that really enjoys USB-C. You should have been able to hear that click, and again, the click as it comes out, click. There is no issue here whatsoever. For anyone who saw that video, you know that I was really disappointed when I could just give this a little tug and the USB-C popped out, and I couldn't understand how this would ever be reliable enough of a connector, but thankfully, I now really enjoy USB-C, and I've joined everybody else in the frustration of anything that now isn't USB-C. It's not perfect. It's really frustrating in certain ways. I'm now learning kind of the pitfalls of the different capabilities and how things are really complicated now. You can't just look at a port anymore and instantly see what it's capable of. On these Macs, we know that it's a Thunderbolt 3/USB 4 port. We know that they're both capable of doing up to 40 gigabits per second, but it's impossible to keep an internal database of what machine does what, and you can't just look at it to see anymore. It is a little bit of a shame, but I guess as long as we know what our own machines do, that's kind of the main thing. And it's more of an issue on the PC side, I think, where you're looking at a system and you just simply don't know what the port is capable of without a deeper dive. That wasn't really an issue back in the day. For the longest time, even when USB 3 came out, 99 times out of 100 they were blue. So you knew that that was USB 3. Anything that wasn't blue is USB 2 for the most part. So there we go. That's my MacBook Air, and I wish I had an envelope to put it in here because I'd quite like to do that. That classic ad back in the day, I was always a huge fan. I thought that was really cool. And I remember in the very early days of YouTube when that first advert released and they put it in the envelope, I just remember people shoving all sorts of laptops into envelopes because they all happened to fit. Like I remember seeing a video with a 12-inch PowerBook going in there. That was so cool. There's a lot more I want to say about Apple Silicon and M1/M4 and where we are. I'll save a lot of that for the M4 Mac Mini video. I just wanted to give you guys a nice little ramble on this MacBook Air. It's a lovely little thing, it's great. And just like all these Apple Silicon Macs, it does everything I throw at it. So if you've got absolutely no idea what the air fryer joke is about and you just want to chat with me more generally and chat with the community more generally, then please check out IMNC Nerdy Natters Discord server. Also check out our YouTube membership. That's fairly new and kind of the ball is rolling on that now really nicely. And also check out my other links in the video description. As you guys know, I have great fun making these videos and I'd love to create even more. Huge thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in hopefully the M4 Mac Mini episode, which will be the next video.